In Timber Hollow, North Carolina, the air still smells like cut grass and barbecue charcoal. It's the kind of small southern town where people nod at strangers, trucks outnumber sedans, and Sunday potlucks are sacred. Nothing bad ever happens here, until it does. It started with a scream, not the kind you hear at football games or horror movies. This one cut through the stillness like a bone saw, sharp and raw. The kind of scream that makes the hair on the back of your neck stand at full attention. A scream that doesn't beg for attention, it demands it. Mickey O'Connor dropped his wrench into the carburetor bowl and didn't even bother wiping his hands. He sprinted across his backyard lungs, seizing against the summer heat. The scream had come from the Turner's yard, 2 properties down, but sound carries differently when panic is behind it. He dove through the hedge like he was 30 years younger. Thorns clawed at his arms, but he didn't care. What he saw on the other side would stay with him forever. 3 teenage boys. 1 rake, 1 shovel, 1 rusted hoe, and a barefoot 6-year-old boy cornered against a red oak tree, shaking so hard his little knees knocked together. In his arms was a blood-stained piece of fabric, a torn black vest. Standing in front of the boy, teeth bared and body trembling, was a massive black dog. The kind trained to take down grown men. The kind that didn't back down even when he was bleeding from the ribs and barely holding himself upright. The kind that dies before it lets a child be hurt. Get away from him, Mickey's voice was gravel and thunder. The boys froze. The tallest, Jared Henderson, turned slowly, face twisted with disgust. That dog bit Mason? He's psycho. Mickey didn't even need to look. He knew the story. Saw the bloodied arm, the controlled bite, the defensive posture, the eyes full of loyalty and fear. This wasn't aggression, this was protection. And the dog was losing fast. Drop your weapons now, Mickey growled. There was no request in his voice, only fury. The smallest boy dropped the shovel like it burned him. The others hesitated until Mickey took a single step forward. That was all it took. They ran. Not far, but far enough. Mickey dropped to his knees next to the dog. Black fur matted in crimson, chest heaving, one eye closed, the other half-lidded. The dog collapsed into his arms like he'd been waiting to. The boy Liam Turner fell beside him, his face smeared with dirt and tears, his voice barely a whisper. He protected me, Liam choked, just like Daddy said he would. 15 minutes later, the emergency vet clinic doors slammed open. Mickey's arms were wrapped around 80 pounds of dying dog, his shirt soaked with blood, his jaw set like stone. Behind him, Liam stumbled in barefoot, holding the torn canine collar like a cross at a funeral. Help, Mickey's voice cracked. He's dying, we need help now. The receptionist froze mid-pen. Sir, are you the owner? I'm family, Mickey snapped. That's all you need to know. Vet techs rushed out without another word. One pulled a gurney, another pried the collar from Liam's hands gently, carefully. But the boy refused to let go. He saved me, Liam whispered. Don't let him die. The glass doors swung shut behind the team. The quiet of the waiting room was suffocating. Mickey slumped into a cheap plastic chair. His hands trembled, not from fear, from rage. Liam sat next to him, silent. His little legs didn't even reach the floor. His fists clenched around the collar so tightly his knuckles turned white. Shadow. That was the name engraved in tarnished brass. Mickey leaned back and stared at the ceiling. 30 years ago, he would have run into burning buildings without hesitation. He'd faced collapsed fireballs, screaming victims. But this, watching a bleeding dog fall trying to save a boy no one else cared to protect, this broke something in him. If you're moved by stories of heroic animals who risk everything for the people they love and the humans who refuse to look the other way, take a second and subscribe to the YouTube channel, Heroes for Animals. We believe their stories matter because someone needs to speak when no one else will. 20 minutes passed. Dr. Amanda Patel emerged from the back mask pulled halfway down her chin. Her scrubs were streaked with dark stains. Multiple fractures, she said without ceremony. Rib cage, left leg, deep lacerations, internal bleeding, possible cardiac swelling. Mickey stood. Will he make it? We're trying, she replied. The next 6 hours are critical. She looked at Liam. Her voice softened. He shouldn't be alone. I'm not going anywhere, Mickey said. His dad, she asked. Gone, Mickey said, voice sharp. Shadow was left to protect him. The words felt heavy in the room, like they meant more than anyone could say aloud. Mickey noticed the shadows outside through the blinds. Long, thin prison bar shadows painted across the tiled floor. They weren't alone. He stood slowly, walked to the glass, and looked across the street. A man on a porch stubbed out a cigarette and went inside. A curtain dropped in the corner house. A woman looked up from her lawn chair, met his gaze, and looked away. Mickey's fists clenched. He remembered seeing the curtains twitch during the attack. Faces in windows. Shapes hiding. They saw. They saw it happen and didn't do a damn thing. They saw, Mickey said aloud. Liam turned. Why didn't they help? Mickey stared into the boy's eyes, too old for six. Sometimes people are scared, he said slowly. Liam shook his head. They weren't scared. They were hiding. And somehow, Mickey knew he was right. The hour crawled. No news from the back. No change in Liam's posture. Until finally the boy's voice broke the silence. A whisper. Is Shadow dreaming? Mickey blinked. I reckon he is, kiddo. Daddy said K9s dream different, Liam murmured. He said they dream about saving people. Mickey looked away. His throat tightened. Well, your daddy was right. Shadow dreamed about me today, Liam said, eyes fixed on the collar. I think he knew I needed him. Mickey placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. Scarred, steady, and he didn't let you down. Shadow had been in surgery for nearly 2 hours. Mickey hadn't moved from his seat. His elbows were locked on his knees, hands clasped like he was trying to hold himself together from the inside out. He watched the second hand on the wall clock spin tick, 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 like a slow metronome of dread. Next to him, Liam sat silently curled in the same chair since they arrived. His small hands still clutched the K9 collar, like a child holding a broken crucifix. The edges were cracked from years of wear, and a corner was stained red. He rubbed the brass nameplate over and over. The room was cold, not in temperature, the AC hummed just fine, but in atmosphere. The kind of cold that came from waiting for news you were afraid to hear. No juice box, no warm blanket. No cartoon playing in the background could pull Liam from that collar. And Mickey knew why. You know, Mickey said gently, your dad and I go way back. Liam didn't respond. His eyes were fixed on the collar. But he was listening. Mickey could tell by the way his breathing shifted. I was there the night Shadow saved his life. Liam looked up, just a flicker of curiosity. Your dad was still a rookie, Mickey went on. We were backing up a drug raid off I-73. Everything was fine until it wasn't. 3 guys with knives came out of nowhere. I was in the truck. Couldn't get to them fast enough. He paused, remembering it like it happened yesterday. Shadow took down 2 of those men before your dad ever pulled his weapon. Your dad got the last one. They walked out with a couple scratches. Could have been body bags. Liam blinked. Shadow's a hero. Mickey nodded. So is your dad. The words settled in the space between them like dust in a sunbeam. Neither moved. The quiet was deeper now, not as fearful, but heavier somehow. Then Mickey turned toward the window again. Across the street, the neighborhood was moving like nothing had happened. The old man on the corner porch was watering his tomato plants. 2 teens rode their bikes past the clinic without even looking up. A woman closed her blinds one slat at a time, careful not to make eye contact with anyone. That's when Mickey remembered it in vivid detail. Curtains had parted during the attack. He'd seen it. Faces at windows. Neighbors watching, quietly, from the safety of their living rooms. But not one person had stepped outside. Not one call had come in to 911 from anyone but him. Not one adult had yelled or intervened or even shouted stop. They had watched a child and a dog be attacked with garden tools, and they'd closed their windows. Mickey's stomach turned. They saw, he muttered. Liam looked up again. What? They saw and did nothing. Liam's brows drew in. Why? Mickey hesitated. How do you explain cowardice to a 6-year-old? Sometimes, he said, choosing every word with care, people are scared. Liam shook his head. They weren't scared. They were hiding. Mickey's jaw tightened. Yeah, I guess they were. The clinic doors whooshed open. Dr. Patel emerged, still in scrubs, gloves tucked into her waistband. Her face looked pale, exhausted. He made it through surgery, she said quietly. He's stable. For now. Mickey exhaled hard, like he'd been holding his breath for hours. But we're not out of the woods, she added. There's damage to his lung and internal bruising. We've got him on fluids and oxygen. He's sedated. Liam's eyes lit with something close to hope. Can I see him? Not yet, she said gently. He's still unconscious, but he made it through the worst. Liam nodded slowly. He'll wait for me. The vet returned to the back, leaving Mickey and Liam alone again. Outside, the sky was turning the color of damp ash, that pale gray-blue twilight that only comes before a storm. Somewhere far off, thunder rumbled like an old man clearing his throat. Mickey's phone buzzed in his pocket. A message, then another, then 10 more. He pulled it out. The photo he'd sent earlier to a journalist friend, Liam, in the waiting room clinging to Shadow's collar. His face a mix of blood and dirt and fear had gone live. The headline was brutal in its clarity. Retired K9 nearly killed defending. 6-year-old town silent. Boys walk free. Mickey felt a rush of both guilt and relief. He hadn't done it for attention, but someone needed to say what no one else had dared. Within minutes, the story caught fire. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, news blogs, community forums. Justice for Shadow began trending nationwide. Mickey's inbox exploded. The comments came fast. Where were the adults? Those boys should be in jail. This poor child and that brave dog. I'd have tackled those kids myself. Makes me sick. This town needs to answer for its silence. Donations began pouring in, not just for Shadow's care, but for a legal defense fund. Animal rights groups picked up the post. Then major news outlets started calling the clinic. And then Mickey's phone rang. Unknown number. He answered, expecting another reporter. This is Sheriff Roy Klein, said the voice on the other end. We need to talk about what happened to that dog and that boy. By 6:30 p.m., the sheriff's cruiser rolled up to the clinic parking lot, tires crunching gravel, sunlight reflecting off the windshield. Sheriff Klein stepped out slow, like he had all the time in the world. Tan uniform, mirrored glasses, thick mustache. The kind of walk that used to mean something. But Mickey could see right through it now. They'd gone to high school together, fought fires together once upon a time, but now Roy Klein was the face of a system Mickey no longer recognized. Roy tipped his hat. Evening, Mick. Heard about the dog. Mickey crossed his arms. His name's Shadow. He's stable barely. Roy's eyes shifted to the boy beside him, still curled in that chair, holding that collar like it was made of gold. I need to ask the kid a few questions. Not tonight. Mick. He just watched the only family he has left almost bleed out in front of him. Mickey said, voice like fire through gravel. If you're looking for a statement, go ask the boys who did it. Roy let out a sigh. They're minors. They're monsters. Roy hesitated. You don't get it. Jared's dad owns half the town. Mickey cut in. Yeah, I know. That why they think they can beat a dog with a shovel and get a slap on the wrist. The sheriff looked over his shoulder, lowered his voice. You start poking at the Hendersons, things get messy. Real messy. Mickey stepped forward, nose to nose. No, Roy. Things got messy when that boy screamed for help and your town looked away. Roy's face cracked. Just a second. Like something inside him had already been eaten hollow by guilt. You don't know what it's like, he said. Every time someone files a complaint, evidence disappears. Witnesses pull out. People get fired. They've got protection from higher up. Mickey stared him down. How many animals have died, Roy? How many kids too scared to talk? No answer. That night after the sheriff left, Mickey sat beside Liam again. The clinic was quiet. Lights dim. Machines humming behind glass walls. Liam didn't speak for a long time, until finally he whispered, Mr. Mickey. Why did they hurt him? He didn't do anything wrong. Mickey swallowed hard, looked the boy in the eye. I don't know, kiddo. Some people hurt others just because they can. Liam nodded once, then looked down. My dad said Shadow would know when I needed him most. He looked up again. I think he knew today. Mickey didn't trust his voice enough to answer, so he just reached out and held the boy's hand. 6 days after Liam's letter broke the internet, Timber Hollow didn't feel like Timber Hollow anymore. The quiet town, known for its picket fences and low crime rates, was now the subject of national news segments and primetime debates. What had started as a story about a brave dog and a terrified little boy had peeled back something much darker, a pattern of silence, a system of privilege. And people were angry. Not the kind of performative outrage that burns bright and fizzles. This was the kind that simmers heavy, slow, and impossible to ignore. The clinic had turned into a media fortress. Reporters camped out in lawn chairs on the sidewalk. Satellite trucks lined the block. Some held signs, Justice for Shadow. Others just wanted a glimpse of the boy whose letter made America cry. Dr. Patel had to put up blackout curtains in the waiting room. Mickey used the back door to bring in takeout. Liam hadn't been outside since the visit from the U.S. Attorney's office. Shadow was improving, slowly. He could lift his head now, eat small bites of boiled chicken. His tail wagged when Liam walked in, uneven but undeniable. The staff whispered that it was like watching a miracle grow day by day. But Mickey wasn't celebrating yet, because no one had been arrested. That changed on a humid Thursday morning just after dawn. Mickey was sipping black coffee in the staff kitchen when a local news anchor interrupted the broadcast with a flashing red breaking news banner. Henderson Estate raided by federal agents. Allegations include animal cruelty, witness tampering, and political corruption. Mickey set the mug down slowly. The footage was grainy shot by a neighbor across the street, but clear enough. Black SUVs, flashing lights, agents in windbreakers walking into the Henderson property with sealed warrants. And then, 3 teenage suspects, including Jared Henderson, have been taken into federal custody for questioning. By 9 a.m., Mickey's phone had exploded. Calls, texts, emails, even a voicemail from Sheriff Roy Klein. He didn't return any of them. Instead, he walked to the back recovery room where Liam sat beside Shadow, reading aloud from a tattered picture book. His tiny hand rested on the dog's paw. "Hey, kiddo," Mickey said, voice soft. Liam looked up. "Is it bad news?" Mickey shook his head. "No, actually. It's the kind where people finally do the right thing." Liam blinked. "They arrested them." "Sure did." Liam didn't smile. He just nodded and turned back to Shadow. But not everyone was celebrating. That evening, Sheriff Klein arrived at the clinic, not in uniform, but in jeans and a tired-looking button-down. His eyes were bloodshot, and his shoulders sagged under the weight of something he couldn't hide anymore. Mickey met him out back next to the dumpsters where cameras wouldn't catch them. "I came to apologize," Roy said, no preamble. Mickey crossed his arms. 6 days too late. "I know. 6 years too late," Mickey corrected. Roy looked down, kicked at the gravel. "I got scared," Mickey said. "I watched what the Hendersons did to whistleblowers. Jobs gone. Families ruined. Court records sealed. You think we didn't try?" Mickey didn't answer. He didn't have to. Roy kept going. "I got calls from the state attorney's office today. They're investigating my office too. My deputies. The way we handled animal abuse complaints, I'm probably going to lose everything." Mickey's voice was calm. "Should have thought about that before you let a 6-year-old face 3 violent kids alone." Roy nodded. Then quietly, "He's braver than half this damn town." Later that night, Liam asked a question Mickey hadn't expected. "Can we go to the tree?" Mickey turned down the TV. "What tree?" "The big red oak," Liam said. "Where it happened." Mickey hesitated. "You sure about that?" Liam looked him in the eye, those same steel gray eyes his father used to have. "I think Shadow wants to go." The next morning, before the sun was fully up, Mickey helped Shadow into the back of his pickup. He built a little ramp using plywood and rope and lined it with a gym mat from the clinic. Shadow still limped, but he moved with purpose, like he knew exactly where they were headed. They parked 2 blocks from the Turner house and walked the rest of the way. Liam held Shadow's leash with both hands, his cheeks puffed with effort, but he didn't complain. Mickey walked beside them, silent, alert like a bodyguard. When they reached the oak tree, everything stopped. The backyard was overgrown. The grass hadn't been cut since the incident. Mickey noticed the remnants of the broken rake now half buried in dirt. A piece of the shovel's wooden handle lay nearby. Liam knelt next to the tree, right where he'd been pinned days ago. Shadow stood in front of him. Again. This time not bleeding, not broken, just present. Protective. They stayed like that for a while. The wind whistled through the branches. A cardinal landed on a fence post. Insects buzzed in the distance. Then Liam pulled something from his pocket. A folded piece of paper, crumpled at the edges. It wasn't the letter that was safe in a frame now. This was something else. A drawing? He taped it to the tree with a piece of medical tape. The picture showed a boy and a dog, both standing in front of a storm cloud, arms out like shields. Above them, in crooked 6-year-old handwriting, "We didn't run." The town's energy kept shifting. People started knocking on the clinic's door, not with microphones, but with casseroles and thank you notes. A retired vet offered to donate his services. A local high school started collecting donations for animal shelters. The church bulletin listed Shadow in its prayer section. Timber Hollow was changing not by force but by example, by watching a kid and a dog refuse to be afraid. That Saturday, Ava Chen returned. This time she brought an invitation. "We're convening a grand jury," she told Mickey and Dr. Patel, "and we want Liam's voice in the room." Mickey stiffened. "He's 6. We don't want him to testify," she clarified. "But his letter, it shifted things. And the photo. We'd like him to read his letter or record it, whatever he's comfortable with." Dr. Patel looked unsure. "But Liam," he just nodded. "I'll read it again." The video was shot in the clinic break room. No lights, no makeup. Just Liam sitting cross-legged on a rolling chair holding the same piece of notebook paper he'd written days before. Mickey held the phone. Liam read slowly, carefully. At the end, his voice wavered only slightly. "Shadow would never let you down," he said. "I hope we don't let him down either." The video was played before the grand jury, then aired again on local TV, then again on national networks. It was reposted, translated, quoted, sung, turned into classroom posters and therapy dog campaigns. But more importantly, it became a line in the sand. A reminder of what happens when good people look away and what can happen when one small voice dares to speak. 6 weeks after the raid on the Henderson estate, the trial officially began. The town of Timber Hollow had never seen anything like it. The courthouse, usually quiet and dusty with old case files and traffic violations, now buzzed with reporters, federal agents, and a jury pool more nervous than anyone wanted to admit. The front steps were lined with people holding signs. Some held photos of Shadow, some held Liam's letter, some just stood, arms crossed, silent but watching. Because this wasn't just about 3 boys and a dog anymore. It was about a town that had gone quiet too many times. Mickey walked into the courthouse beside Dr. Patel and federal prosecutor Ava Chen. He hadn't worn a suit in 10 years, but today he did. Dark gray, tight in the shoulders, smelling like mothballs and old hopes. Beside him, Liam wore a little navy blazer with khakis, his dad's police badge pinned proudly to the chest. His hair had been combed, though not well, and his shoes didn't match. He'd insisted on wearing the scuffed sneakers Shadow once laid beside at bedtime. And beside Liam walked Shadow. The dog's limp was still noticeable, but his head was high. His coat had regrown in patches where the wounds had healed, and his K9 vest replaced by the department after the story went national read. Service dog, guardian of the brave. Inside the courtroom, reporters whispered into microphones. Artists sketched quietly. The judge, a sharp-eyed woman in her 60s, entered to respectful silence. When the defendants were let in, Jared Henderson and the 2 others, Liam didn't look at them. Not even once. Shadow growled softly low in his throat, but calmed the moment Liam placed a hand on his back. Ava Chen opened with precision and purpose. This is not just a case about 3 boys beating a dog, she began. It's about a pattern of silence, of privilege, of choosing not to act. It's about a child nearly left to die with no one to speak for him, except a retired K9 and a letter. Witnesses were called. Veterinary staff described Shadow's injuries, fractures, blood loss, organ trauma. Neighbors testified with downcast eyes, finally admitting what everyone already knew: they'd seen something, but said nothing. One broke down on the stand, sobbing into a tissue. I was scared, she said. I didn't think it was real, but it was. I saw Liam. I saw the blood. Mickey gave testimony, too. He didn't shout, didn't accuse. He just told the truth. They stood there laughing while a child begged for help, he said. And the only soul who stepped in was a dog that was already past his prime. That's not just wrong. That's shameful. The defense tried to paint it as a misunderstanding. A prank gone wrong, boys being boys. But the photos of Shadow's wound said otherwise. So did the bite marks on Mason's arm, controlled, not frenzied. Defensive, not predatory. And then came the moment everyone had waited for. Liam took the stand. He looked impossibly small in the witness box. The judge asked if he wanted a booster seat, but he shook his head. A microphone was adjusted. Shadow sat at his feet, calm, silent, unmoving, the way he always had when Liam needed him most. Can you tell us what happened that day? Ava asked gently. Liam nodded. I was under the tree reading a book. Shadow was lying next to me. Then they came. They were yelling. One had a rake. He paused. They told me I couldn't be there anymore, that my house didn't belong to us. Jared said my dad was gone, so nobody cared. A hush fell over the courtroom. And then Ava said, Shadow stood in front of me, Liam said, voice steady. They tried to hit him, but he didn't move. He didn't bark. He just stood there. What did you do? I screamed, Liam said. I screamed really loud, but nobody came. The courtroom was utterly still. And Shadow won. They hit him. A lot, but he didn't leave. He never left. The judge paused proceedings. Half the jury was crying. The sketch artist had stopped drawing. Even the bailiff had to wipe his eyes. Liam stepped down. Shadow followed. When they returned to their seats, the room exhaled like the boy had reminded them all how to breathe. Closing arguments were swift. Ava didn't need theatrics. She just held up a printout of Liam's letter. Your Honor, these words came from a 6-year-old, but I'd argue they carry more truth than most adult testimonies I've heard in my career. Shadow didn't move. I think that's what love looks like. That love, that courage was met with violence, and then by silence, but today it's met with justice. Deliberation took 3 days. The verdict came on a cloudy Friday afternoon. Mickey, Liam, Shadow, and Dr. Patel were seated in the front row. Ava sat nearby, her face unreadable. The judge entered. The jury filed in. On all counts, the 4 persons said we find the defendants guilty. Animal cruelty, assault, obstruction, conspiracy, all of it. The courtroom didn't erupt. It didn't need to. The silence was enough. The weight of it. The echo of finally being heard. Outside, the reporters scrambled for sound bites. But inside, Liam just leaned down and whispered, "We did it, buddy." Shadow wagged his tail once. 2 months later, the town gathered beneath the red oak tree. It was fall now. The leaves burned in shades of orange and gold. The grass had been trimmed, the tools removed, the broken branches cleared. In their place stood a bench, and beside it a statue. A life-size bronze German shepherd, standing alert, eyes forward, tail low but ready. At his paws, a small collar cast in metal. A boy's drawing etched into the plaque. The inscription read, "In honor of Shadow, who stood when others didn't. Dedicated by the town of Timber Hollow for the brave, the loyal, and the voiceless." Liam stood beside the statue, Shadow by his side. A microphone had been set up, though Liam didn't need it, not anymore. His voice at 6 years old had already traveled farther than most adults in a lifetime. He looked at the crowd, neighbors, teachers, news cameras, strangers from other towns. "My dad used to say being brave means doing the right thing, even when it's hard," Liam said. "Shadow was brave for me, so now I want to be brave for other kids and other dogs who don't have someone to protect them." He looked down at Shadow and smiled. "I love you, buddy." Shadow leaned into him. The tail thumped once. Mickey stood at the back, arms folded. Dr. Patel wiped a tear from her eye. Ava Chen stood beside her, phone in hand, not recording, just listening. Because some things aren't for evidence. Some things are for remembering, for standing still in the truth. 3 months had passed since the trial. Timber Hollow had returned to its slow rhythms, Friday night football lemonade, at the farmer's market, leaves crunching under sneakers on the school sidewalk. But something had changed for good. You could feel it in the way neighbors looked at each other, a little longer, a little deeper, like they were still carrying the echo of a boy's letter and a dog's stand. For Liam Turner, life didn't go back to normal. It became something better. Every week he and Shadow visited Timber Hollow Elementary. Not for therapy, though some called it that, but for something bigger. They'd sit in the library with kids who didn't talk much. Some were grieving, some had learning delays, some just felt small, but they all listened when Liam read. Not because he was the best reader in the room, he wasn't, but because Shadow listened too. And if a dog as brave as Shadow could sit still and listen, so could the other kids. That was the rule. One Wednesday morning, Liam stood in front of the third-grade class, holding up a book with a chewed corner. "Shadow used to bark at vacuum cleaners," he said proudly. "But he doesn't anymore. He just growls at leaf blowers." The class erupted in giggles. Shadow, lying next to Liam with a paw over his vest, let out a heavy sigh, like he agreed. Afterward, one of the kids whispered to their teacher, "If that dog can protect Liam, maybe he can protect me too." The teacher blinked back tears and nodded. Maybe he already is. The town had honored Shadow. The country had reposted Liam's letter millions of times. But the most powerful moments happened quietly between people when no one else was watching. Like the mail carrier who started keeping a dog treat in her pocket. Or the teenage boy who returned a stolen bike with a note that simply read, "Trying to do better." Or the neighbor who knocked on Mickey's door holding a casserole and an apology. "I didn't know what to do that day," she said softly. "But I know now. If anything ever happens again, I'll show up." Mickey took the casserole and nodded. That's all anyone can ask. One cool Saturday afternoon, Mickey was working in the garage when Liam came out dragging a box almost bigger than him. "What you got there, bud?" Mickey asked. Liam grunted. "Stuff for the center." He meant the new Animal Outreach Center being built with the money raised from donations, the same fund that started as in Justice for Shadow and turned into something so much larger. Mickey bent down and helped open the flaps. Inside were toys, food bowls, books, and a framed photo. It was the original picture Mickey had taken Liam holding Shadow's collar in the emergency room. Only now it had a hand-drawn caption written in marker, "This is what standing looks like." 2 weeks later, the center opened. They called it the Shadow Project. Ava Chen flew in from D.C. for the ribbon cutting. So did Dr. Patel. So did a K-9 unit from Tennessee who said Shadow's story inspired their entire department to implement better post-retirement care for working dogs. There were speeches. There was cake. But the most unforgettable part was when Liam stepped up to the mic again without needing it. He was wearing his dad's badge and his blue blazer, a little less baggy now. His voice carried clean across the yard. "There are a lot of brave people in the world," he said. "But sometimes they're not people. Sometimes they're dogs. Sometimes they're the ones who stay when others leave." He looked down at Shadow, now sitting proudly beside him in his new vest. And sometimes they're the reason we remember how to be brave too. Liam and Shadow would go on to visit 10 schools that year. They were invited to speak at police departments' animal shelters, and even a conference on childhood trauma in Raleigh. But they always came back to the same place, the little house on the corner lot with the creaky porch and the big oak tree in the backyard. That tree now had a plaque of its own. It read, "We didn't run." One night after their usual bedtime walk, Liam sat on the porch swing with Mickey. The stars were out. Crickets hummed softly in the bushes. Shadow lay curled up on the rug near their feet, his breathing slow and even. Mickey sipped his iced tea. "You ever get tired of all the attention?" he asked. Liam thought about it. "Sometimes, but then I think, if we didn't tell what happened, people might forget." "Forget what?" "That it's not about the bad guys," Liam said. "It's about not being like them." Mickey let that settle. Then he smiled. "You're a lot like your dad." Liam smiled too. "That's what Shadow says." They laughed. And for the first time in months, it wasn't the kind of laugh that felt like a break from grief. It was just joy. Plain and simple. The kind of joy you earn after you fight for something that matters. Later that week, a woman from a national magazine called Mickey to ask if she could write a feature article. She asked all the usual questions. What was Liam like as a baby? Did Shadow ever show signs of trauma? Would Mickey ever consider writing a book? Mickey listened politely. Then she asked, "Do you think justice was served?" And for once, Mickey didn't hesitate. "Yes," he said, "because the world didn't forget. Because a kid who should have been scared out of his mind told the truth anyway. Because a dog who should have died got to wake up the next morning. Because neighbors who stayed silent found their voice again. Because something happened here that didn't fade away." He paused, then added, "And because of Shadow, I don't think this town's ever going to look away again." Epilogue. Mehrere Jahre lang des Sohnenu. In the years that followed, Liam and Shadow became something of a local legend. A statue of them was erected outside the Shadow Project Center, not because they were famous, but because they meant something. Because they changed things. Liam kept writing letters, speeches, notes to kids who needed them. Every Christmas, he sent cards signed, "From Liam and Shadow, we've got your back." And Shadow, he kept doing what he'd always done. He stood. Because sometimes the bravest thing you can do isn't run toward danger. It's stay. Because sometimes love doesn't roar. It just refuses to move. Because sometimes the greatest heroes don't wear capes. They wear vests. And sometimes they leave behind a collar and a boy who knew exactly what to do with it. It started with a letter, then a courtroom, then a statue under an old oak tree. But the story of Liam and Shadow didn't stop in Timber Hollow. It grew across counties, across states, across hearts that had never met them, but felt like they knew them. Because the world had seen something in that boy and that dog, something they hadn't seen in a long time. Uncomplicated love, steadfast courage, and the reminder that silence is a choice. 6 months after the trial, the first invitation came in from out of state. A middle school in Asheville wanted to bring Liam and Shadow to speak during their anti-bullying awareness week. Mickey was hesitant at first. "Kid's only 6, he told the school principal over the phone. "You sure you don't want a PowerPoint or some decorated poster board instead?" The woman laughed. "No, sir. We want the kid who made grown men cry and the dog that made them stand back up." Liam didn't hesitate when asked. "I think we should go," he said, looking at Shadow. "People still need to hear about him." Shadow, now 7.5, had healed in body, but never forgot his role. When Liam zipped up his travel vest and said, "Let's work," Shadow perked up like he was back in the police unit again. They drove to Asheville in Mickey's old pickup. The same truck that once carried a bleeding dog and a trembling boy now carried 2 living legends with a cooler full of PB&J's dog treats and gas station root beers. The school gym was packed, not just with kids, but with parents, teachers, staff. Shadow trotted in ahead of Liam, tail raised, vest crisp. When they reached the stage, Liam looked around nervously at first, but only for a second. He pulled out a folded paper and began to speak. "This is Shadow. He saved my life. He got hurt doing it, but he didn't move. He didn't bark or growl or try to run. He just stood." He paused. "That's what love looks like." And with those 5 words, the room changed. Afterward, kids lined up to pet Shadow. Some told stories about being bullied. One girl whispered that she once saw a friend get pushed into lockers and did nothing but wouldn't make that mistake again. Another boy asked Liam quietly, "Were you scared?" "Yeah," Liam said, "but Shadow wasn't, so I stayed too." More invitations followed. A sheriff's department in Georgia, a K-9 fundraiser in Missouri, a child protection event in Tallahassee. Each place was different, but each time the message was the same. Sometimes a voice is small. Sometimes a dog stands where people won't. But when love shows up, it doesn't have to shout. It just has to stay. Back in Timber Hollow, things had changed too. The Shadow Project was thriving. The small outreach center now had 4 full-time staff, 3 therapy dogs in training, and a calendar of school visits booked months in advance. Dr. Patel helped train the medical response unit. Mickey oversaw community engagement, and Liam, he was officially the youngest youth liaison in the county's education network, a title he liked mostly because it meant he could skip class on Fridays for speaking trips. Shadow's vest now had a patch that read, National Outreach Dog, still standing. But with growth came pressure. One evening, as Liam sat cross-legged on the clinic floor brushing Shadow's coat, Mickey knelt beside him. "You doing okay, buddy?" he asked. Liam shrugged. "Yeah." Mickey looked at him a little closer. "It's okay if this gets heavy sometimes. You're doing a lot, more than most adults I know." Liam was quiet for a while. Then he said, "People think I'm brave all the time, but sometimes I just miss my dad." Mickey's chest tightened. "That doesn't make you any less brave." Liam nodded. "I think Shadow misses him too." Shadow looked up, ears twitching, and nuzzled against Liam's knee. Not long after, a letter came from Washington, D.C. It was from the Department of Justice, a formal invitation to speak at a national law enforcement conference about K-9 retirement programs and child protection policy. Mickey held the letter in one hand and a glass of iced tea in the other. "Well, we've hit the big leagues now." Liam didn't fully understand the weight of it, but he understood what it meant. "They want to talk about Shadow. They want to talk about both of you." The conference was held in a high-rise hotel ballroom filled with people in pressed uniforms and polished shoes. Flags lined the walls. Microphones gleamed under spotlights. Liam wore his best button-up, and Mickey tried and failed to tame his hair with water and a comb. Shadow didn't need polishing. He walked in like he owned the place. During the panel, one officer stood up. "I've worked in K-9 for 17 years, he said, "but I'll be honest, I never thought much about what happens to these dogs after we retire them. Until now." He looked at Liam. "You changed that." Ava Chen attended too. Afterwards, she met them in the hallway holding a manila folder. "You two have been busy," she smiled. Mickey smirked. "They grow up fast when the world's watching." "I've been working on something," Ava said, "with the Attorney General's office. A new initiative. Liam and Shadow would be the face of it." "What kind of initiative?" Mickey asked. She opened the folder. The words at the top read, "National Act for the Protection of Retired K-9s and At-Risk Youth, the Shadow Law." The proposal outlined federal support for post-service medical care for retired K-9s, emotional support grants for children impacted by trauma, mandatory reporting standards in animal abuse investigations, community-based outreach modeled after the Shadow Project. At the bottom, it said endorsed by the Turner family and Shadow. Liam stared at the paper. "Will it help more dogs like him? And more kids like you," Ava said. The following spring, the Shadow Law passed through Congress, unanimously. It wasn't just a policy shift, it was a signal. That one voice paired with one unbreakable bond could change the way a country listens. Back in Timber Hollow, nothing looked extraordinary. The same diner served the same meatloaf. The same dogs barked at mail trucks. The same porch lights flicked on at dusk. But if you stayed long enough, if you sat under the red oak tree near the statue near the bench, with a little plaque that read, "We didn't run," you'd feel it. The difference. The choice to show up. The understanding that standing still for someone isn't nothing, it's everything. That summer, as lightning bugs blinked in the dusk and Shadow slept peacefully at Liam's feet, Mickey sat on the porch and asked a quiet question. "Do you ever wonder how long people will remember all this?" Liam didn't look up from his notebook. He just kept writing and said, "They don't have to remember everything." He scratched Shadow behind the ears. "Just the part where he didn't leave me." Years passed quietly in Timber Hollow. The seasons rolled over the town like pages in a well-loved book. Spring painted the sidewalks with tulip petals. Summer brought porch fans and lemonade. Fall meant football and bonfires. Winter dusted the statue under the old oak tree with soft white snow. And through it all, the story of a boy and his dog never faded. Because some stories don't end. They just grow with the people who live them. By the time Liam turned 12, he had visited 23 states with Shadow. They'd spoken in schools, shelters, town halls, even a military base in Colorado. Their faces had appeared in newspaper cartoons, educational posters, and a viral animated short that played during National Kindness Week. But none of that ever changed how they lived back home. The porch swing still creaked the same way when they sat side by side. The backyard still smelled like old pine and fresh-cut grass. And every night, Shadow still curled up beside Liam's bedhead, resting on an old pair of mismatched sneakers, one of which still had a bloodstain no one ever dared to scrub out. When the call came from New York City, Mickey thought it was a mistake. "They want us to," what he asked the woman on the phone. "Carnegie Hall," she repeated. "We're honoring Americans who changed the narrative for children and animals. Liam and Shadow are on our short list." Mickey laughed. "Well, I guess we better find a tie that doesn't smell like diesel and dog treats." The trip was surreal. Liam had never been in a building taller than the water tower back home. Now he was standing in the middle of Manhattan, wearing a black suit and a blue clip-on tie, same color as his dad's uniform shirt. Shadow wore a special service vest custom-made for the event, navy blue, gold embroidery. On one side, the words, "Guardian of the Brave." On the other, he stood when no one did. They didn't make a big speech that night. Liam didn't like crowds much, and Shadow didn't like bright lights. But when the MC asked him what bravery meant, Liam just said, "It's not being fearless, it's staying anyway." The room erupted in applause, but Shadow didn't flinch. He just sat calm and loyal eyes on Liam like always. A few months later, things changed. Shadow started slowing down more than usual. At first, Mickey thought it was just age. He was getting up there for a working dog, especially one with old injuries. But when Shadow stopped eating, stopped wagging, even stopped following Liam from room to room, they knew something was wrong. The vet ran tests. It was cancer. Aggressive. Liam sat with Shadow on the clinic floor while the results came in. He didn't cry. He didn't speak. He just held the old leather collar in one hand and Shadow's paw in the other. The collar was faded now, nearly smooth from all the years of being held clenched, clung to like a compass in a storm. "I don't want him to hurt," Liam said quietly. Mickey nodded, voice thick. "He's been holding on for you for a long time, kiddo." Liam looked up. "Then I'll help him let go." They brought Shadow home for his final days. No machines, no cold tables, just his favorite spot on the rug by the fireplace where the sun hit him in the morning and Liam could reach him from the couch. People stopped by, quietly, neighbors, teachers, former officers, strangers who had been moved by the story. They didn't come to say goodbye. They came to say thank you. On a clear morning, Shadow took his last breath with his head on Liam's chest and Mickey's hand on his back. There were no howls, no screams, no final dramatic moment. Just silence, the kind that comes when something truly sacred passes through the room. They buried him beneath the oak tree, the same place it all began. The statue stood nearby. The plaque was polished, and now next to it, a small bronze marker had been added. Shadow 2016-2029 partner. Protector, friend, he never ran. Liam didn't speak much that week. He went to school, ate dinner, sat on the porch like usual. But something inside him had shifted. One night, Mickey sat beside him sipping his usual tea. The stars were out. The wind was light. "He held on as long as he could," Mickey said. "I know," Liam replied. I thought we'd have more time." Mickey nodded. "We always do, until we don't." After a long silence, Liam said, "It's my turn now." Mickey glanced over. "Your turn to stand." And stand he did. At 14, Liam became the youngest state ambassador for animal welfare and youth resilience in North Carolina. He gave keynote addresses, wrote a children's book titled Shadow Didn't Move, started a scholarship fund for kids who stood up for others, often anonymously, quietly the way he once did. And everywhere he went, he carried two things. Shadow's collar, now encased in a velvet-lined box. The letter, now laminated, worn at the corners, still signed in a child's handwriting. He kept visiting schools, but now he brought others with him, new therapy dogs trained under the Shadow Project kids, who had found their voice teachers who had learned to listen better. One day, a second grader raised her hand and asked, "What happens when the brave dog isn't there anymore?" Liam paused, then answered, "Then you become the one who stays." Years later, Liam stood once more beneath that oak tree, older now taller, with broader shoulders and deeper eyes. The grass was greener that day, the town quieter. Next to him stood a new dog, a young German shepherd named Ranger. Not a replacement, never that, but a continuation. Ranger looked up at Liam like he knew everything that came before him. And maybe he did. A family walked by holding hands. The father paused and pointed at the statue. "That's the one," he said to his daughter. "The dog that didn't move." The girl stared at the sculpture in silence, then said, "I want to be like him." Liam smiled. And somewhere in the rustle of the oak leaves, it felt like Shadow was there. Still standing, still watching, still loving. Because stories like theirs don't end. They echo. They ripple through generations, through classrooms, through living rooms, where someone decides not to stay quiet. Through one child choosing to speak up. Through one dog who refused to back down. In the end, Shadow's real legacy wasn't the letter, or the trial, or the statue. It was the unshakable truth he left behind in the heart of one boy and the countless lives that followed. Sometimes the bravest thing we do is stay. It had been 1 year since the day they said goodbye. The oak tree stood taller now, its leaves thick with spring green casting shade over the bench and statue that had become something more than a memorial. People didn't just stop by to read the plaque, they came to leave something behind. Dog tags, drawings, stuffed animals, notes written in shaky crayon or elegant cursive, folded and tucked into the grass like prayers. Shadow's story had outlived the headlines, and Liam Turner, he was still writing it. He was 10 now, taller, leaner, and a little more confident in how he carried himself. He still didn't like the spotlight, but he knew why he stood in it. Because Shadow couldn't anymore. And because someone needed to keep telling the truth about what bravery really looked like, not the kind in movies, not the kind that wore capes, but the kind that simply stayed when everyone else walked away. The Shadow Project had grown beyond anything Mickey could have imagined. What began in a one-room clinic wing now filled a community center near the town square, complete with a therapy dog program, a youth storytelling room, and a K9 honor wall that displayed framed collars of retired heroes from across the state. Each collar had a nameplate, each one had a story. And at the very center in a locked glass-lit case was Shadow's collar. Worn, weathered, blood-stained, whole. Mickey cleaned the glass every Sunday. One afternoon, a teacher from New Jersey called. She ran a class for at-risk fifth graders and wanted Liam to video chat with them. They don't talk much, she said. They don't trust anyone. But they watched your story, and for the first time I saw them lean in. Liam agreed. He didn't write a speech or rehearse. He just sat cross-legged on his bedroom floor, the laptop open in front of him, wearing his dad's badge around his neck and Shadow's service patch sewn onto his hoodie. Hi, he said. I'm Liam. I'm not good at big words, but I know how it feels to be scared. The screen was silent, but the kids were listening. He talked about the day it happened, the rake, the tree, the way Shadow stood without moving. He talked about losing his dad, about nights when he felt like no one could understand what it was like to be too small in a world that didn't care. Then he said, you don't have to be big to be brave. You just have to stay when someone needs you. One of the kids cried. Another asked how to train a dog. A third whispered, I wish I had a Shadow. You do, Liam said. You just haven't met him yet. That summer, Timber Hollow hosted its first Stand Day, a town-wide event dedicated to honoring K9's service animals and children who had made courageous choices. There was a parade, a flag ceremony, and a storytelling tent where kids read their own shadow letters aloud, messages about things they had done to help others, no matter how small. Mickey emceed the event. Dr. Patel spoke about the science behind therapy animals. Ava Chen flew in from D.C. to deliver a keynote on justice reform. But the moment that broke everyone's heart, Liam's closing line. He stood on the same steps where the courthouse once saw silence, looked out at the crowd and said, Shadow saved my life once, but now I think he's saving a lot more. He was right. Over the next 2 years, the Shadow Project opened satellite centers in 3 other counties. They partnered with schools to train staff in trauma-informed care. They launched a scholarship for kids who advocated for animals or stood up against abuse. And they started a new initiative, the Ranger Program, pairing retired service dogs with children who had experienced loss, grief, or neglect. The goal wasn't therapy. It was partnership, the kind Liam had once found in a dog who didn't run. Ranger, the German Shepherd. Liam had helped train himself, became the first official Shadow Legacy dog. He wasn't meant to replace Shadow. No one could. But Liam needed someone to walk beside him now. And Ranger, with his calm demeanor and eyes that tracked Liam's every movement, felt like a natural continuation of the promise Shadow had left behind. You think he'd be proud of me? Liam asked Mickey one night, sitting on the back porch, Ranger snoring gently at their feet. Kid Mickey said, staring at the sky, I think Shadow never stopped watching. Sometimes Liam dreamed of that old day. The tree, the screaming, the rake. But in the dream it changed. He wasn't backed into a corner anymore. He was standing in front of someone else, a kid smaller than him, and behind him instead of Shadow was a line of other dogs. Ranger, Bruno, Belle, Justice. Dogs who'd been saved by the program he'd helped build. And when the dream ended, he always woke up holding the collar. Still there, still real, still his. One cold morning, Mickey found Liam in the Shadow Center's back room, sitting alone with a notepad. "What are you working on?" he asked. "A new letter," Liam said. "Another speech?" "No, just a letter, like the first one." Mickey walked over and read the opening lines over his shoulder. "Dear kid who feels too small, I know what it's like to think no one will come, but sometimes help doesn't sound like sirens. Sometimes it wears paws, and sometimes it looks like you. Stay. Love, Liam." Nurserons. Later that week, they printed copies of the letter on cards and left them in libraries, classrooms, and vet clinics across the region. Just a small thing. But small things, Liam had learned, are often the loudest when no one else is speaking. At 13, Liam had already done more than many grown-ups. But he didn't care about awards or news stories. He cared about the kids who still thought they were alone, and about the dogs that still waited for someone to fight for them, and about that promise, the one his dad whispered to Shadow before he died: protect him, no matter what. And somehow, through every school gym, courtroom, and sidewalk bench, that promise had kept growing. The oak tree still stood. The statue still stood. But the real monument, it lived in the heart of every child who picked up a pen, every adult who finally stepped forward, every dog who stood where no one else would, and in the boy who learned that love doesn't always arrive loud. Sometimes it just refuses to leave. By the time Liam turned 15, Timber Hollow had stopped being just a town. It had become a symbol. Not in the flashy way cities chase headlines or build slogans, but in the quiet, grounded way that sticks. The kind of reputation you earn when people tell stories that begin with, "Did you hear what that boy and his dog did?" For many across the state and even beyond, Timber Hollow was now known as the birthplace of the Stand movement. And Liam Turner, he was its heartbeat. It wasn't his idea to call it a movement. It started as a few letters, a few classroom visits, a ripple of kids talking about kindness, responsibility, and courage. But by the time it reached its third year, people had started organizing under a single name: Stand, Speak, Truth, Act, Now, Defend. What it stood for was simple: speak up when someone's in trouble, act when no one else will, defend the voiceless human or animal. By then, more than 30,000 students had written their own shadow letters. Thousands of dogs had been rescued, retrained, or retired through connected outreach centers. Teachers were using Liam's story as part of their character education curriculum. And at the center of it all was a boy who still refused to let go of an old leather collar. One morning just before the new school year, Mickey found Liam sitting at the kitchen table surrounded by envelopes. "What are you up to now?" Mickey asked, sipping his third cup of coffee. Liam looked up, smiling. "It's the Shadow Scholarship applications. We got over 400. 400, Mickey raised an eyebrow. "Last year you had 50. We expanded the criteria. It's not just for kids who save animals now. It's for any kid who stands up, even if no one sees it." Mickey sat across from him. "And how do you know who's telling the truth?" "You just know," Liam said, holding up one letter. It was from a 7th grader named Caroline, who stopped a classmate from being bullied, even though it made her lose her only friend. "She didn't ask for anything," Liam said. "She just said, 'I didn't want to be one of the people who walked away.'" Mickey leaned back in his chair. "Sounds like someone we used to know." Liam hadn't stopped missing Shadow. He never would. But Ranger, his new K9 partner, had grown into his own kind of quiet hero. Still young, still a little goofy, but loyal in a way that reminded everyone of the dog who started it all. Some days, Liam would sit under the oak tree with both collars in his lap, Shadow's worn and faded Rangers new and clean. And he'd talk about what he was afraid of, about who he wanted to become, about how hard it still was to stand sometimes. And every time Ranger would lie down beside him, pressing into his side like a living shield, the message was always the same: you're not alone. That fall, the Shadow Project opened its 5th regional center, this time in Charlotte. The ribbon-cutting ceremony drew over 800 people, including police officers, therapy dog trainers, social workers, and families whose lives had been changed by the movement. Liam spoke last. He didn't bring notes. He just stepped to the podium and said, "My story started because no one showed up except a dog. I don't want anyone else to wait for a dog to be braver than the people around them. So if you see someone hurting, don't walk away. Don't scroll past. Don't say it's not your job. You don't have to be a hero. You just have to be there." The crowd rose to their feet. Mickey clapped harder than anyone. That night, Liam stayed late helping the new staff get the puppy training room set up. As he was leaving, a woman approached him, maybe mid-30s, holding a leash attached to a skittish-looking brown mutt. "Are you Liam Turner?" she asked softly. "Yeah," he replied, shifting his backpack. "I just wanted to say thank you," she said. "That dog you're helping train, her name's Maple. My daughter found her chained behind a foreclosed house. No food, no water." She swallowed. "She said she remembered your story and couldn't walk away. She called animal control, stayed with the dog till someone came." Liam looked down at Maple, who wagged her tail timidly. "Your daughter sounds brave," he said. "She is," the woman said. "She's 7. Stories like that became common. Letters, calls, random strangers walking up in grocery stores. Your story helped my son tell the truth about what happened at school. My niece asked to visit the animal shelter instead of having a birthday party. My grandson said, 'I want to be the kid who stands.' Each one a reminder that bravery, when passed along, becomes a seed. And seeds grow." One cold December morning, as frost gathered on the statue beneath the oak tree, Mickey and Liam stood beside it with mugs of hot chocolate. The town was preparing for the annual holiday parade. Kids ran past in scarves and mittens. A high school band practiced 3 blocks away. Liam stared at the statue for a long moment. "I don't know if I'll ever do anything more important than this," he said. Mickey looked at him surprised. "You're 15. "I know. But Shadow's story, it's the best thing I've ever been part of." Mickey nodded slowly. "Maybe. Or maybe it was just the beginning." Liam tilted his head. "What do you mean?" "I mean, legacies aren't made in one moment," Mickey said. "They're built piece by piece, day by day. You're not done yet, kid. Shadow gave you a story, but you've been writing the rest ever since." Liam smiled. The kind of smile that knows something isn't over just becoming something else. In the spring, Liam began writing a book. It wasn't a memoir or a children's story. It was a field guide. How to stand a guide for kids who want to do the right thing, even when it's hard. He wrote in plain language, honest language. He included doodles, short journal prompts, and letters from other kids. It wasn't polished, but it was real. When the book released later that year, it was printed in paperback with a black and tan shepherd on the cover and a note that read, "This book is dedicated to everyone who thought they were too small to matter. You do, and someone is waiting for you to stay." Liam didn't care about the sales numbers. He only cared about the email he got from a school counselor in Wyoming. "A student walked into my office today shaking. She handed me your book and said, 'I need help because I don't want to be quiet anymore.'" Liam read the email 3 times, then printed it, then folded it, then tucked it into the inside flap of Shadow's collar case. The oak tree still stood, the plaque still shined, and now next to it a new carving had been added to the bench. 3 words, simple, powerful, permanent. "You can stand." Liam Turner turned 18 on a rainy Tuesday. No fanfare, no big party, just pancakes at the diner with Mickey, a long walk through the center with Ranger, and an early evening spent under the oak tree where it all began. The statue hadn't changed. The plaque still gleamed, but Liam had. He stood taller now, his voice deeper, his eyes steadier. But beneath all that, he was still the same boy who had once whispered, "He saved me," in the corner of an emergency clinic, clutching a bleeding dog's collar, like it was the only thing holding his world together. Only now he was the one holding up the world for others. The Shadow Project was no longer just a local nonprofit. It had grown into a national network with programs in 15 states, a K-9 rescue and retirement foundation, and a youth leadership division that had trained more than 20,000 kids in courage-based action. Everywhere he went, people still brought up Shadow. Some carried copies of the book. Some recited lines from the letter. Some still cried when they talked about that photo, the one of 6-year-old Liam in a plastic chair holding a collar tighter than most people hold hope. But Liam never tired of telling the story. Because it wasn't just about a dog, it was about a choice. And choices echo forever. He was a sophomore in college now, majoring in social work, minoring in canine therapy, attending school 3 towns over, but still coming home every other weekend to visit the center, check in on new dogs, and mow the lawn outside the clinic where it all began. Mickey had retired for real this time. He now ran a small woodworking shop next to the post office and taught a night class at the high school called Courage and Character. His students knew who he was. They just didn't know how deeply he still carried it. Dr. Patel still ran the local clinic. She kept Shadow's x-ray framed in her office, not because it showed damage, but because it reminded her of endurance. Ranger was older now too, his muzzle going silver, his steps slower, but his eyes never stopped following Liam in crowds in classrooms and late-night walks where they didn't talk much. Just as stayed, Liam still wore his dad's badge on hard days. pinned inside his jacket. Still visited the grave on his dad's birthday. Still whispered thank you when no one else was around. And some days he still held the collar Shadow's collar, the one with the worn leather strap and the brass tag that had survived everything. Because some things aren't meant to be put away. Some things are meant to be carried. That fall, the Stand movement celebrated its 5th anniversary. There was a national conference held in Chicago. Over 2,000 attendees, panels, guest speakers, workshops. Liam was the keynote speaker. He stood on stage in a black button-down shirt and jeans. No notes, no script, just his voice. He spoke for 17 minutes. No slides, no fancy stats, just stories. We tell ourselves bravery is loud, that it kicks in doors or raises fists. But I learned something different. Bravery is the dog who doesn't move. Bravery is the child who tells the truth. Bravery is the neighbor who finally speaks. Bravery is showing up, over and over, until showing up is what the world learns to expect. The crowd stood when he finished, not because they had to, but because some truths don't need to be explained, they just need to be felt. After the speech, a man approached him backstage. Middle-aged, quiet, eyes red-rimmed. I was one of the people who looked away, he said. Back when it first happened, I lived down the street. I saw it through the blinds. I didn't move. Liam looked at him not with judgment, but with something gentler. Did you ever tell anyone that, he asked? Just now, the man whispered. Liam nodded. Then you did move. Thank you. Legacy Liam had learned wasn't built in a single day. It was built in the decisions people made after the story ended. It was built in a girl who adopted a 3-legged retriever and wrote her own shadow letter, in a boy who reported abuse and helped get his sister out of a bad home, in a sheriff who changed his department's K-9 retirement policy after reading a 6th grader's essay. Shadow's story wasn't Liam's anymore. It belonged to everyone who decided to stand. That winter, on the anniversary of the trial, Liam returned to Timber Hollow and hosted a small memorial. Just a dozen people, mostly original staff, a few kids from the early outreach classes, and Ranger, now graying, still dignified, still beside him. They gathered around the oak tree with hot cocoa in hand. Wind rustled the branches above, and someone read Liam's original letter out loud. Not a dry eye. And when it was over, Liam said something quiet, something he'd been thinking about for a while. I want to take Shadow's collar to Washington. They all looked at him. I want it to be part of the National Museum of American History. Not because it's mine, but because it belongs to the kids who learned what standing really means. 2 months later, in a small ceremony on a quiet Thursday morning, Shadow's collar was placed in a climate-controlled display case, right beside a fire helmet from 9/11, a military uniform from Normandy, a protest sign from the March on Washington. The plaque underneath read, Shadow retired K-9 protector of a child. In Timber Hollow, when no one came, he did. He stood, and so did the boy behind him. Donated in memory of courage that never left, for every child who felt small and every dog who stayed. And maybe that's how stories are meant to end. Not with a final chapter, but with a door that stays open, with a collar behind glass, with a bench beneath an oak tree, with a voice that says, even years later, I'm still here, and I'm still standing. To everyone who's followed this journey, from the first scream in the backyard to the courtroom, to the quiet letters and loud movements that followed, thank you. Thank you for standing with Liam, for remembering Shadow, for believing that one boy and one dog can change a town, and that town can change the world. Before you go, let me ask you, when it was your turn to stand, did you, and if you didn't, will you now? Because someone somewhere still needs you to stay.